Hi, I'm Jon Grauman, the founder of Resident. I'm excited to welcome you to another episode of Resident Reserve, where we go behind the scenes to meet the people and explore the craft behind some of the most extraordinary wines in the world. Today, we're at Blankiet, just outside the town of Yountville, with the owner Claude Blankiet and winemaker Graeme MacDonald. Blankiet's vision is unlike most in Napa. They set out to make an old world style wine that can stand alongside Bordeaux's elite first growths. While Bordeaux winemaking can often be shaped by limitations such as climate, rules, and history, Napa is shaped by choices like control, precision, and freedom to push boundaries. Blankiet brings both those worlds together, old world structure executed with new world precision. What makes today's experience so unique is that Blankiet actually invites the comparison that most Napa producers avoid. I'm going to be tasting their wines side by side with Bordeaux's first growths, including Petrus, Cheval Blanc, Lafite Rothschild, Margaux, and so many more. This is going to be an unbelievable experience, and I, for one, am very excited. Let's go. Hello, my friend. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Jose, welcome to Blankiet Estate Paradise Hills.
Thank you so much.
You.
So everyone, this is Claude Blankiet. He is the owner and vintner here at Blancier. We are just outside the town of Yountville, and I'm so excited about today. This is going to be an unbelievably special experience. Let's start by just talking about where we are. I know you have a few different, let's call them microclimates on this site, each one that is going to be sort of treated and farmed differently. Tell me about it.
So I started 30 years ago. I bought the land in 1996. Nothing was here. So basically everything you see as far as vine, winery, caves, everything has been done by us in the last 30 years. We are obviously at the foothills of the Mayakama mountain range, and we have a very, very important feature, which is the West Napa Fault. That is a substantial fault line going just on the other side of that ridge.
So the fault line created two different soil types?
By seismic activity, constantly, with different eruption. On this side of the fault, most of the magma is made out of andesite.
Okay.
While on this side of the fault, the magma is basalt.
Okay.
Now the basalt, in time, exposed to weather, rain, carbonic acid, decompose into sand and clay. So that's why you see that.
Sure, I can see the red clay coming through. Yeah.
You know, huge amount of clay, which is essential for Merlot. Merlot loves clay.
Not only are you making more of an old world style wine, but you're following more of the Bordeaux philosophy in terms of blending, in that you have the right bank, so to speak, where you have your Merlot planted, and then you're going to have sort of your version of the left bank where you're going to have your Cabernet and perhaps other Bordeaux varietals planted. Is that about right?
Maybe, maybe not.
Okay.
I grew up in Burgundy, so I would say we're making Bordeaux varietal here. We have planted Bordeaux varietal, but the methodology is very Burgundian. We have 4 varietal planted. Obviously, they ripen at different times.
Sure.
And we have most important protocol is to harvest ripe. We have a freezer, special freezer container that is set up here, that the rest of the year is parked in the back of the property. We had that container, freezer container made, custom made for us. And we put the grapes in pallets as soon as we harvest. Let's say from 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, they go into the freezer that is set at minus 25 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay. Wow.
And, you know, so very, very cold. And in the few hours that they are in the freezer, the grape firm up. They don't freeze because of the sugar content and the time there, but they lower their temperature, which is about 55, 56 degrees at night, to about 22, 23 degrees Fahrenheit. Not minus, but above.
Does anyone else do that? I don't know if I've ever heard of anyone else doing that.
No, I don't think so. Some here they elevated. Most gentle system of destemming, because again, you don't want to bang the fruit. And before we were using the freezers, typically that machine here was just dripping juice all day long, and flies were all around the place.
Got it.
Okay. Since we use a freezer, none of that happened. so the fruit is more pristine. So here inside is
Welcome. Hey, thank you
Jon
so much for having us.
Grauman, the associate winemaker and the specialist of those computers.
So tell us about this optical sorter.
Yeah, so we actually run 2 in line, which I think is pretty unique for Napa. So it kind of gets
very.
double sorted in a sense. But the main focus for the opticals is that it takes out material other than grape. So we call that MOG.
Okay.
Raisins and like pink berries. So that would be underripe berries. So what you're trying to sort out is material other than grape would be, bits of leaf and stems that come in from the vineyard.
Sure.
Raisins would be the dimpled berries, so the cameras can pick up on that kind of pock-marked skin. They also have infrared, so they can see beneath the skin and into the pulp. So a raisin is more dense, and so the light doesn't penetrate that density.
Got it.
So the infrared can pick it up. So it actually does a better job than the human eye, which is pretty impressive. And then the pink berries would be anything that's kind of green or pink, so berries.
Immature.
Yeah, immature berries. They're filled with,
Understood.
malic acid. So ultimately, it's very bitter, very sour. So those are the things that we work to select out. So every morning I come in, and as the berries go across the belt, they're airborne for about a quarter of a second. And in 1/1000th of a second, the cameras are determining accept or reject on an individual berry. And if it's a reject, as the berries come across the panel, there's a whole manifold of compressed air nozzles, and it'll shoot a jet of air at that single berry. So rather than letting it continue through, it gets kicked out down here.
So in 1/1000th of a second, it's making that
It's
assessment and
2/1000th of a second,
determination,
absolutely.
but not just on one berry, on
Yeah.
multiple berries at
Yeah.
a time.
Correct. Yeah, because it's a huge panel of cameras. Yeah, every morning kind of see what's getting kicked out here, and we look at what's making it on the table.
Okay.
And if, there's too much stuff that we don't want that's making it on the table, then
use that
we
first.
up the selection. We can change the kind of the parameters, so to speak, behind the scenes.
So the concept behind that thing is to eliminate anything that we don't that we don't want in the fermenters.
Right.
So overripe berries, and on the other side of the spectrum, underripe
Underripe berries, sure.
So here's Graeme MacDonald.
E. Graeme MacDonald. How are you,
MacDonald.
man? Yeah, great to meet you. Big fan, everyone. Legendary winemaker here in the Valley, Graeme MacDonald. I'm a big fan. Very excited to talk to you about what your role is here and what the philosophy and process is that goes into making Blankiet, because it's something very different, not only for the Valley, but different than any of the other wines that you make. So perhaps that's a good starting point, is how do you approach making the wine here differently than you do MacDonald, of course, your own wine, or Brand, or 001, because it's such a different style of wine.
Yeah, so one of my mentors in winemaking is a guy named Tony Soter,
Okay.
who helped a lot of brands develop their own styles, which I think is a really important part of the equation, because for me to have a winemaker style that I spread across everywhere doesn't help the individual estates express what's best for their terroir. And
When we were out in the vineyard, Claude talked a lot about ripeness and how important that is. And it's impossible not to make comparisons between Napa and Bordeaux, Old World versus New World, even though they should both be respected for what they are differently. But Napa can oftentimes be defined by its ripeness, while you could say that Bordeaux is defined by perhaps its restraint. How is it that you are adopting that ripeness that Napa is so well known for, having obviously warmer climates that produce more sugar, but making it, refining it, finding that restraint and that structure to express it in a way that is more old world style, and really kind of marrying the two?
so one of my best friends' family has a place in the right bank, and I was emailing him during 2011 trying to come up with, oh my God, it's such a tough vintage in Napa, what do you do? And he said, wow, if that was a vintage in Bordeaux, that would be one of our greatest vintages of a century.
Right.
So I think I've gone past the point of thinking that there's any sort of problem. Like, I think ripeness is a good thing, and that's what makes a signature of California and Napa Valley. But at the same time, I think you want to have restraint. And so that's what I think Denny brought to Blancier before I got here, is he had already started that journey into restraining the wines, imparting more elegance, not trying to be as manipulative from a winemaking standpoint. And then I'm a farmer first and foremost, a winemaker secondarily. So the translation of how we implement that in the vineyard versus the cellar just continued to the point where Claude and I both love food. And so I always try to relate this. My analogy is chefs.
Yeah.
And a lot of the wine world wants to be modern cuisine, and the winemakers intervene and change the way things taste, make fun foams, whatever. But this would really be, if I was a chef, I'd be making sashimi. I think the ocean grows the fish. Blankiet Estate is like, it's all about what we don't do, not what we do in the winery.
I have one more question for Graeme before we go up to the house. So, it's natural that people are often making comparisons between Napa and Bordeaux and whether one is better. And the reality is the only thing that they really have in common is the varietals that they grow in the regions. Because aside from that, obviously different climates, different philosophies. What is your thought on that subject? Do you think that it's fair to be talking about them in the same subject, or just allow them to essentially stand on their own and be what they are individually?
So I think Bordeaux makes beautiful wines. We've all learned so much from them, but in California we don't have the same restrictions, and so we can innovate, we can try new things.
A lot more freedom.
And I think that works well with our mentality of what we're doing here at Blancier. Is we want to push the boundaries. We don't want to rely just on the traditional approach to winemaking. We want to push the valley and the craft further. And I think that's where we have a lot of opportunity versus Bordeaux. But that said, is the idea is not to mimic that. I think in the 70s and 80s in Napa, there was a lot of sort of attention built on how do we create the grand chateaus of the left bank.
Right.
And the more I realize and the more I get to understand the valley, I think it's more like Burgundy, and there's all these micro estates doing very interesting things, and I think that's our future versus the large chateaus. So in essence, Bordeaux teaches us what to do and also what not to do.
No, that's great. I love that perspective. And look, Bordeaux can be defined and shaped by so many different things. Obviously, it's history, but with that history comes various governing laws and limitations. And out here, the innovation, I think, breeds so much more precision and refinement and the perfection of the craft. And that's what I like, is kind of the blending of those two worlds. No pun intended. Yeah. Well, I have been here multiple times, but it just never disappoints. It is just spectacular what you have built here. I mean, I feel like we've been immediately transported to France. It's or Italy or anywhere. I mean, yeah, just
5
incredible.
years. It took 5 years. A lot of material we brought from Europe. Years and years of accumulating brick and roof tile and ironwork, and we brought some artisans from Italy. The architect was from Perugia, so we brought a lot of Italian masons, some French masons that did the staircase that goes up.
Well, again, as I mentioned before, I am fortunate enough to have experienced this before, and wait till you see what comes next. Okay, so we are here in the tasting room at Blancier, which you can see is adorned by some spectacular art. And we are about to embark on what is going to be an unbelievable experience. We are going to taste some of Blancier's 100-point wines against some First Growth 100-point wines. This is a once-in-a-lifetime kind of experience. I believe we are going to start with the right bank, which is to say that we're going to start with Rive Droit. And I'm just going to apologize. It's going to be one blanket apology for the whole rest of the episode. My French isn't great. I don't even speak French. So if I stumble over the words, I apologize, but I'm going to do my best here. Claude will certainly step in and correct me. But for now, I want to introduce my other friend, Julian, here, who is going to be gracious enough to be pouring for us. And what are we starting with?
Absolute honor here. Wine number 1, Petrus, 2019.
I think I've heard of this one. I think I've heard of this one.
You may have even had it before.
Yeah, maybe.
100% Merlot there to start the right bank tasting. And yeah, we'll go from there.
Okay, so different vintages, because again, wanted to highlight what the 100-point vintages were in Bordeaux versus a 100-point vintage here. Obviously going to have different climates.
We tried to use 18 and 19 because they were great vintages in both Pomerol and the Saint-Emilion area, and in the Medoc area, and at the same time, great vintage here in California. So we could compare, similar fruit.
Well, out of respect and reverence, I don't want to have my first sip without saying thank you. I really appreciate this and the opportunity. And
while you enjoy the Petrus 19, I will tell you the 2018 Le Pen in glass number 2, also 100% Merlot. And everything after that is going to have varying degrees of Cabernet Franc, and the blends will change more and more. 2023 vintage, we celebrated 25 years of wine production.
Okay, so the question I was sort of angling at is you're celebrating your 25th vintage for most of the wines in this lineup. Any idea how many years they've been producing these wines, just top of your head? I mean, I'm sure it's a different answer for each one, but on average?
A lot more than...
Well, sure, that's certainly the easy answer,
When we go to the Medoc area, we'll taste Lafite. I think Lafite, first time something was written about a site named Lafite was in 1200 or so. So California is the Wild West, we're discovering sites. The last, I would say, 20, 30, 40 years, it has been just a discovery of sites.
Okay, so the third one that we have here.
Cheval Blanc, 2019 vintage with 54% Merlot, 38% Cabernet Franc, and 8% Cabernet Sauvignon. That one shocks people a little bit. It's actually newer for that centuries-old estate. The inclusion of Cabernet Sauvignon in their right bank wine probably has more to do with climate change than anything else.
Interesting.
It's a very small addition, but very meaningful.
Got it. So historically, Cheval Blanc did not have any Cabernet Sauvignon in it.
Correct.
Okay. So 19 really was a just historic vintage for Bordeaux, because I'm seeing a lot of these, most of these are 19s.
19s and 18s are consistently, both great vintages.
Let me ask you a question, Claude. If not for this tasting, which again, I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity, would you be opening these now? So young?
No will be the general answer. But when you taste Le Pen, and especially Le Pen for me, and that wine is so young, but Petrus and Le Pen have done, and all of them have done so much effort to do what they did not do in the past. Before they were harvesting grapes that were slightly unripe, and then it required 10, 15, 20 years for them to drop down the excess tannin and acidity and kind of become palatable. They have done a major, major improvement in realizing that younger generation do not have the time and the facilities to store wine for 15, 20 years. So it's much harder, as I said before, it's much harder to make wine that are capable of aging and be approachable young.
So, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for a second, because I'm fascinated by this topic, and so much of it, of course, is inherently very subjective. It's just all about each person's individual palate. I've had the opportunity on rare occasion to taste some older first growths, an 84 Mouton Rothschild or an 84 Cheval Blanc, obviously, great wines, great vintages. I found that there was just such little fruit left.
Yeah.
It wasn't really, and especially coming from California and growing up drinking Napa wines, wildly different, so I try not to compare the two, but I would prefer them a bit younger, but it seems that's not the general sort of philosophy.
Well, if you try an 82 instead of an 84, you'll find some fruit left. Depend upon the vintage.
Sure.
82 was very, very fruity, actually to an excess at a time where the British press and most of the French actually didn't care for 82. They thought it was going to be an over-the-top of wine. It's only Parker who, when he tasted it, said that's going to be an exceptional vintage. And that made the reputation of Parker in Europe, because he was so right about the 82.
That's interesting. Right.
Personally, I prefer them younger than older.
Same.
Okay?
Yeah.
I still like to have fruit. I still need to be reminded that we're drinking fruit juice, and not just...
The question of the age of the wines comes up regularly, and I think most people are shocked that we would be tasting these wines so young.
Yeah.
But I then think they're shocked again when they taste them.
Okay.
Totally.
The biggest change my palate has sensed is going to the Cheval Blanc. That had a totally different flavor profile than the Petrus or the Le Pen. How different is the soil profile in Pomerol versus Saint-Emilion?
It's different, but in the case of Cheval Blanc versus those two, those 100% Merlot, this is a high proportion of Cabernet Franc. And in the aromatic, that's what you pick in Cheval Blanc. is that
And the
if
Ausson
everybody
is
was-
predominantly Cab Franc now.
Predominantly Cab Franc there.
Interesting.
We have 65% Cabernet Franc and 35% Merlot. And when we move to Lafleur, it changes again ever so slightly.
I have to say, having gone through at least the old world lineup, not having got to the Rive Duarte
Number
yet,
6.
the Lafleur really stands out for me. Wow.
yeah.
Powerful wine.
That is a phenomenal wine. That is
So
just
a
great.
lot, again, Cabernet Franc has a large component in La Fleur.
And so Lafleur recently leaving the Pomerol AOC based on their dedication to their site and farming it the way they want, instead of some rules that may be a little bit outdated based on farming practices that at one time weren't necessary. So if you talk about irrigation or shade cloth or what plants you have or don't have or wildlife, they've made huge headlines recently as kind of carving out their own path.
Good for them.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, good for them. This, sorry to interrupt, this, I just smelled the Rive Droit. Gosh.
Droite mean right bank.
Oh my gosh.
So
97% Merlot, 3% Cabernet Franc.
Okay.
The best part about that equation is how similarly powerful the Cabernet Franc is in an increasingly lower percentage amount. It's about finding balance. Graeme wants to find the most balance in that wine.
we want to focus on the Merlot here because we have such an exceptional site for Merlot.
Whoa.
And then a little bit of Cab Franc goes a long way.
The nose on this is unlike anything I've experienced. I'm actually trying to go back in sort of my memory bank of different wines I've tasted and smelled over the years. What's interesting and special about this for me is that this was one of the first wines I ever had of yours, because the first time you were probably pouring this in 21 or 22, I'm guessing, which is when we met. And I believe I still have one of these, which is very exciting for me right now to think about that I have one of these at home. But my gosh, the expression of this, and it's in
Now
this.
you know why it was not here.
Of course. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Because in order to appreciate this, you have to start here, which are, those are the best Merlot expression of the world, at least in reputation.
This is such a controversial thing I'm about to say, and I'm going to offend half the people watching this, and I'll certainly never be invited to Bordeaux. But it's thought of to be the best expression of Merlot. I'm sorry, in this lineup, I feel like I'm tasting the best expression of Merlot. I'm not saying that just because I'm here. I'm not trying to flatter you. Like
we feel, we hear that often. It happened maybe today. Luckily, that wine just feel like.
if you said you get to keep one of these, I'm holding this one. If I got to keep a second, it would be the Lafleur. Okay, so we are now going to be moving from the right bank over to the left bank. Perhaps a different expression. I'm assuming going to be a bit more Cabernet forward, perhaps introducing a few more different Bordeaux varietals. Another amazing lineup here, which I'll let Julian talk about.
A lot more Cabernet in this lineup, but specifically, and for the first wine, Haut-Brion, coming from Pessac-Léognan, the southern part of Bordeaux. Quite a hefty chunk of Merlot in this wine, and that's why it's first in this lineup. So the Haut-Brion has decent
50% almost.
About 50% Merlot, a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc. Petit Verdot will show up before the end of the lineup, that other Bordeaux varietal you mentioned, but in the Haut-Brion. And what I hear a lot of times is so many people saying, wow, that's my first favorite first growth wine.
Very characteristic of their style, very, Haut-Brion is like Haut-Brion and nothing else is like it.
That is great. That's a lot denser than anything we've tasted so far.
Well, the Cabernet Sauvignon, being in the Médoc, is the predominant.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's
Merlot
some darker
is
fruit in
there.
that.
They many times as important as Cabernet, but to tame down the Cabernet. But they all try to use Cabernet as their main grape and using Merlot kind of to make their blend.
That's got a lot of power to it.
Power and density, and we can attribute that also to something even that shows up on the label, the alcohol. That wine's 15%.
Is that 15%?
15% alcohol.
Wow.
And so what you taste and what you feel, you can't make that part up. That wine's going to feel very different than most of the wines in the lineup because of a significantly higher
But
percentage of
it's
alcohol.
in balance.
Very much in balance.
Extremely
So
imbalanced.
you don't taste, you don't have the
Right.
burning,
No.
you know, that you can have wine at 13% alcohol that will taste alcoholic if the rest is not in balance.
Sure.
Yeah. And at the same time, you can have a wine at 15 plus that will be in balance and not taste alcoholic. So
Really the wine that we can owe some debt to for this whole experience existing, the Lafite Rothschild then, 2019, wine number 8. That is 94% Cabernet Sauvignon, 5% Merlot, and 1% Petit Verdot. Jeb Dunnock said our 2019 Mythicus reminded him of a great vintage of Lafite, and he gave the 2019 Lafite 100 points. What better comparison?
Sure.
Then that's kind of how we got the whole ball rolling. So.
My palate seems to lean much more left bank than right bank so far. These are stunning. I mean, these are, like you said, there's power, there's finesse, but there's balance.
but you know, they have tannins that are very soft tannin. There is no grittiness in them. They only can get better with time.
As we move through the lineup, we add Chateau Margaux as well as Chateau Mouton Rothschild.
I just can't overstate, like these are just legendary wines that we're tasting through, and they all are 100 pointers. I mean, this is just, I don't have enough adjectives to describe what a special experience this is.
Chateau Margaux and Mouton Rothschild, both 90% Cabernet Sauvignon, but they vary in their counterparts. Margaux is keeping with its 7% Merlot, 2% Cabernet Franc, and 1 Petit Verdot, while the Mouton Rothschild has 9% Merlot and 1 Petit Verdot.
How often do wineries like this change winemakers? I would have to think that is a
That's a very good
generational
question.
kind of job.
Recent experience, at least, you know, the history of Denis Malbec and his father working at Chateau Latour and his grandfather
it was
working at Chateau
rarely,
Latour.
you know, and it was, I would say, rarely. You know,
What was that, Claude? I didn't get that.
they didn't change often winemaker before.
Rarely.
Rarely,
And
thank you.
rarely. Now, in the case of Denis Malbec, his father, Noël Malbec, was the winemaker at Latour since 1961. His grandfather was in charge of viticulture at Lafite since 1920. So Denis was third generation, born at Chateau Latour. He
pressure.
was born there. You know, they have lodging for some of their employees, and they were born there. So there's pictures of him, you know, with his tricycle, riding down, the vineyard. So that's the old, and they were all blue, what we call blue collar, you know. They're all, they're
Farmers.
Yeah,
farmers
really
first.
humble people.
The nose on the Mouton definitely hits different. It also on the mouthfeel, it's a lot, for me, softer. It actually is lacking a little bit of the sort of complexity of a couple of the others, but the nose on it is massively powerful.
It's really interesting to follow the same wine over a number of years, kind of like the collector's dream, if you will. I have the privilege of tasting this same wine from these same vintages for 4 years now. And it's remarkable how different they are each year. The quality doesn't change.
Right.
What the wine is showing to you on that day or that month or that year.
might-
Adding in the Blankiet wines now, proprietary red number 11, this is a great comparison to the Mouton itself, I feel, based on the blend, which is about 85% Cabernet, 10% Merlot, a little bit of Petit Verdot and Cab Franc to bring balance to that wine. And you'll finish with Mythicus, 100% Cabernet Sauvignon. That's for me when things aren't as fair anymore, but you'll decide.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not even at the Mythicus, and the proprietary, the nose already is, gosh.
The aromatic intensity on the wines
that was the term, the
a
aromatic intensity.
Graham's ability to pack that much in there,
Yeah.
let it unfold in front of you, Not too much, not too little.
Yeah.
And all at the same time.
Somebody needs to bottle that into a cologne. That's just wow. Yep. It's the same experience as the first flight. You get to the end and aromatic intensity, which is a term I'm going to steal. In fact, that's a great band name,
Use
aromatic intensity. Man.
Yeah, you have to experience it. You cannot describe it. You cannot describe it.
I said this before with the first lineup, but as much as I can appreciate that this is not meant to be a competition, and I think that your humility is beautiful and evident and shines through in everything that you do.
You have to, because Mother Nature is going to kick your butt all the time.
Mother Nature always wins.
Yeah.
But the reality is that comparison is a form of competition, and by comparison, at least for me, I mean, your wines really shine more brightly, and I don't mean to say that in the terms of describing the profile of it, that being bright. I'm just saying that they really stand out in every category, in both the aromatics, in the depth of flavor, in the way that it hits your palate and the texture. I mean, they are just
we agree.
unbelievable.
And we have been doing it for years enough. Well, some people, a lot of customers say, "You ballsy guys," you know.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to revisiting all of these, and frankly, I'll stay as long as you'll have me. In fact, if you're thinking of adopting, I'm certainly game. Just let me know. Also, yeah, Josh behind the camera there is raising his hand. He's up for adoption too. One question, last question I want to ask of you as we bring this to a close. If you could have one wine with one person, living or deceased, in one place, what would it be? Who would it be with? Where would it be?
Well, for me, my number one wine has been for many, many years, and it does remain, it's the Haut-Brion 89.
In Haut-Brion 89?
Yes.
Okay.
And, well, Graeme MacDonald or him, you know.
I'll go.
Catherine didn't even make that list.
And Catherine will be the buddies, you know, that I would like to share that, because we do that all the time, and it still at time, you know, just blows us away. We still have those experience where we just cannot believe what we are drinking. For me, one wine will be the Haut-Brion 89, which is to this day probably my favorite, especially out of Magnum. And I had it enough time to...
Naturally out of Magnum, of course. What other way would you drink it? We're not savages.
I know it's...
Well, as I said before, there simply aren't enough adjectives to express how incredibly special this experience has been. I am overwhelmed with gratitude, and thank you for your generosity in sharing your collection.
Before experience, I remember you brought your...
I brought my dad for his 75th birthday. Guys, Blankiet is just operating in a league of its own. Anytime you're able to come to Napa, if you're fortunate enough to get a tasting or find their wine anywhere, grab a bottle. It is truly, truly world-class, as has been demonstrated here today. So thank you so much, guys. Appreciate you, and cheers. Well, we just tasted through 12 100-point legendary wines back to back to back. I hope you enjoyed it just a fraction as much as I did. Thank you for watching this episode of Resident Reserve. If you enjoyed it, please watch another episode and make sure to subscribe.